Hello, everyone. I am Elin Malang, the Content Director APAC at Corinium, and I am excited to welcome Ritendra Banerjee, the Head of Business Insight at Prudential. So before we go into the topic today, Riten, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
So thank you, Helen, for hosting me and this opportunity to be able to share some of my views. Let me caveat, these are not views necessarily of Prudential or any organization for that matter. These are my personal views. Of course, I would be happy to leverage my experiences over the years to share some of these insights. Yeah. I have done different things in life, worked in Big Four, built large system integration companies, worked in technology products, data AI, managed large enterprises, and have been a serial entrepreneur, working extensively in the past few years with some of the marquee opportunities, like for example, leading a firm where we built stacks for Tesla, launching products for digital banking, and in that sense, being one of the first contenders for the digital bank license in Malaysia a couple of years back, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I do a bit of writing, books, and teaching as well. I teach at UCLA, AI and strategy, and what else? Do a bit of pro bono social work with likes of Special Olympics and others. So very excited to be here and look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Riten. So today we will be diving deep into the strategic and operational realities of AI adoption, beyond the buzz and into the real boardroom. With AI quickly moving from pilot projects and to enterprise-wide initiatives, the pressure on leaders to scale with intention, secure the ecosystem, and unlock real business value. So let's begin with strategic level. When we talk about AI adoption from executive plans, what does a strategic approach look like to you? And where does the business insights function sit within this framework?
Yeah, interesting. When I started my work life 2.5 decades back in the consulting world, anything new that you wanted to drive from a transformation standpoint would ideally be bedrocked around a vision, right? And in most cases, companies that outperform markets would leverage a vision that was usually a vision shared. Yeah, the entrepreneur had a vision, and it's a grand vision, and everybody bought into it. Over the years, I guess with the advent of technology and the fact that strategy became a democratic process, not necessarily something that one just spun out of thin air, visions have co-evolved, and we've kind of moved away from a paradigm of a vision shared to a shared vision. And this is something that's co-created. And in the AI world, it's very interesting because one of the dependencies that everybody is grappling with is that there's a lot more unknown than known in terms of where we are headed and what we want to do with what we have, right? So the strategic imperative is that organizations are building shared visions around their AI and AI strategy and what it can do. Now, the other lens to this, you asked me about business insights,
Hmm.
is that there are really three pieces to business insights, right? There is what I call foresight, which is what you're thinking about the future. There's hindsight,
Mhm.
what's happened in the past, and you're kind of trying to figure out so you can learn from it. And there's mindsight, which is what's the stuff we need to know to be able to run the business for today. Business
Mhm.
insights kind of marries the past and the present with what's possible in the future. And the interesting bit is that while there is a strategy and business model piece to it, there's a significant leverage of what you can do with AI and AI, right?
Mhm.
So if I, just skim that a little bit, to the next layer, with data and AI, we could be doing different things, right? So we could be doing descriptives, kind of explain the state of the business in more clear terms.
Mm-hmm.
We could be doing predictives because and AI gives you those possibilities to be able to look at different business models and so on and so forth. And we could be doing prescriptives, which is
Mm-hmm.
where the human intelligence has to kind of work with AI to figure out what are the best choices for the business.
Mm.
So it's a very interesting landscape and mix of what business strategy entails and how we leverage the power of technology, A and AI,
Mm.
to predict future states for the business.
Yeah. So once that vision is set, the future, scaling is often the next big challenge. So what are some of the core principle or guardrails that you believe are essential when rolling out AI across multiple departments or markets?
Yeah. It's interesting you use one of my favorite words, guardrails,
Guardrails.
because I think it's a beautiful way of visualizing how we bring stability to something that's a new journey. Um, Now, in the context of what you just said, I would perhaps extend the departmental analogy to also
Mm,
include countries and regions, and what you could do globally, right? Now, there are two, three pieces to this, right? So one piece is being able to very clearly establish what are the critical minimal outcomes that you'd expect from different parts of the business, such that all these outcomes effectively, they could be mutually exclusive, right? So, for example, just as a case in point, if you look at an operations call center and you have customers calling in, your call drop rates in Malaysia, for example, could be very different from your call drop rates in, say, Philippines. And
oh,
then you could say, okay, I want to deal with call drop rates. How can I use AI to deal with it, right? Now, if you say that, I'm okay living with a 20% call drop rate, it may not be fair. It may be fair in a country where there's good network, for example. It may not be fair in a country where there's no good network. Some of the country operations may also, for example, be highly automated already,
mhm,
whereas some of them may be early in the maturity curve, right? So, long story short, one of the critical challenges is to establish the critical minimal outcomes that you're kind of expecting from each of the pieces of the business and what it means for the whole business, right?
mhm.
Um, there is a there's an interesting way of thinking that I'm a big fan of, and I picked up several years back. It's called MISI, right?
Mhm.
Mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive.
Okay.
So A and AI in that sense gives us enough opportunity to practice MISI so that businesses locally are held responsible for the outcomes that are local. But together they make sense in terms of collective outcomes for the business globally. The other interesting piece on the guardrail side is that in AI, we're seeing that there's a lot of action where businesses locally are driving their own pilots,
Mhm.
right? So there is, if you like, intensive experiences that businesses are building for themselves. Whereas on the other hand, at an enterprise level, we could be driving enterprise-wide initiatives. So, for example, you could say 80% of my business operations needs to be automated globally,
Mhm.
right? And that's an enterprise-wide initiative. Enterprise-wide, the guardrails are primarily about building scale, but making sure that scale doesn't compromise and take away from the creativity and flexibility of what businesses deliver locally
Yeah.
using AI and AI.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. And that also brings us to the issue, the challenge of trust, because that's the currency of customer relationship, especially in financial service. How do you balance the desire to harness personal data for insights with the need to uphold privacy and earn customer trust?
Well, I'll tell you, here's the good news, right? Trust was a nice word, but today it's become a must word,
Uh-huh.
right? And why has it become so? It's become so primarily for consumer businesses. There's still a bit of headroom, if you like, on the enterprise side of businesses. But in consumer businesses, what's happening as, if you look around, whether it's insurance, whether it's FMCG, whether it's automotive, anything that you kind of put your head around, the traditional model of business was that, we are trying to sell everything to everybody, right? But given and AI, now it's possible for us to start looking at a framework of business where we are selling something to somebody, right? The consumer of one is becoming a reality. It's no more about, I could work a little bit with these aspects of your data. For example, your age, and I cluster your age in a certain demographic bucket to be able to create a product for that demographic bucket and that age group, right? But today that's not good enough because consumers are willing to pay for something that's specific to their own needs. And it's not just, happening with reference to, maybe a customized smoothie that you can have or stuff like that. It's also happening in insurance. So for example, today, based on the route that I take to be driving my car, my insurance premium would vary dynamically because I could be taking a route that's not accident prone versus a route that's accident prone, right? My PDA on my hand, smartwatch, tells me how healthy I am today morning. Imagine if that could feed into my health insurance premium in a dynamic way.
That is true.
Instead of paying my annual premiums, right? So therefore, the imperative of trust has become front and center. And the way to deal with trust is, of course, there's enough guardrails from a regulatory standpoint, right? But from a technology standpoint, I think the possibilities are immense. I could give an example. A couple of years back, when, as I was mentioning, was busy launching the bid for digital bank licenses in Malaysia, and we had developed a digital banking platform in California. One of the challenges we had was that, in a digital banking ecosystem, you bring people from different parts of businesses, right? So you've got a telco, you've got maybe a student loan body, you've got a traditional lending organization, you've got an electricity utilities player or what have you. Now, within the context of all that, you're still looking at one customer who does different things with his or her life in a day, right? So we said, how can we leverage the customer's data without not necessarily impinging on issues of privacy? And interestingly, at that point, thanks to central bank allowing us those allowances, we were actually able to propose a solution where we could use, for example, digital twins that gave us enough firewall to be able to work with customer-like data and create products for the customer without impinging on the customer's actual personal data, right? So long story short, what I'm trying to say is that trust has become a centerpiece, one, and two, technologies like digital twinning, federated learning of systems, etc., give us enough flexibility to be able to build those solutions that are trustworthy.
Yeah. So besides trust, another cornerstone another cornerstone when deploying AI at scale is security. So, in your view, what are the most pressing risks that executives need to keep at the top of their mind, and how should they be proactively addressed?
Well, that's a very deep question. I think, there's large organizations obviously have it a little easier because they've got a security infrastructure and a security policy, etc., to keep it in mind. Here's the news. I don't know if it's a good news or bad news, but it is what it is. Alike before, security is still something that people walk out with, right? So the people element of security, I think, is fairly central to AI. And more so because, a couple of months back, I was working on a case where there was a potential IP issue, and some of the data scientists were walking out, and everybody thought, the IP is kind of going to walk out with them. So the CEO said, okay, what we will do is we will create a platform where we will kind of capture the collective thinking capital of these data scientists and create a data science platform. I mean, so much so on the lighter side, the data science platform made the data scientists redundant, and they all lost their jobs, unfortunately. But that was kind of a drastic way in which The organization thought that they could embark on a more secure AI journey because the AI was all in the platform and not with people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's that platform versus people challenge in the AI world when it comes to security that we're dealing with, and different organizations are addressing it differently. That's one dimension. The other dimension of AI is that, which brings us back to your first question around vision and strategy,
Mm-hmm.
is that we are not perhaps spending enough time scoping what we don't want to do with AI. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to share with you a very interesting data point, which I've picked up through my experiences, that most of the security breaches around AI
Yeah.
actually do not necessarily happen around projects or programs that
Okay.
are fairly business critical, right?
Right.
But it happens with projects that are very in the early stages of development, and somebody is a bright potential entrepreneur wants to walk out with that IP and create his or her own business, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
good news is that from a security standpoint, AI leakages are critical to business. AI leakages are fairly minimal, and most organizations are embarking on a platform journey to
Mm-hmm.
be able to de-risk their AI loss.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I bet we can dive into the questions or the topic around risk, security, and trust a little bit more, perhaps in another interview.
Sure.
So for this one, let's talk about measurement. The next one we have in line for this one. So what are the success metrics or KPIs do you think are the most meaningful when it comes to evaluating the ROI or long-term impact of AI?
So here's I like to keep things simple. So the simplest answer is figuring out how artificial are you becoming and how intelligent you are, right?
Yeah,
That's the simplest way of looking at it, and
yeah,
there's meaning in it. But I
yeah.
think there are different ways to skin the cat. One way is to look at the point of singularity, where your artificial intelligence and human intelligence are kind of optimally meeting up, if you like, to
Mm-hmm.
create an optimal outcome and output for your business, right? So you could have a whole bunch of measures that shows that you're progressing on your AI journey. You could have a whole bunch of measures that showcases that you're still leveraging people and human intelligence. And then, you have another set of measures that shows how these optimally interact to be able to create value for the business. If we take a step back, Aline, and look at, in a very simple way, what are the three, four key aspects to an AI journey, and therefore the measures, right?
Mm-hmm.
One aspect is primarily around decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are the decisions that I need to make, and how can AI help me with making those decisions, right? The second is work, right? I've made the decisions, now I need to execute,
Mm-hmm.
right? And therefore, what's the kind of AI leverage I need to be able to execute and the work, if you like. And the third piece is technology, right? The choices that we need to make on the technology side, the tools, etc., that will help us leverage all this, right? So the other set of measures, while one is the point of singularity between AI and human, as people call it, the other is to look at proliferation and impact that we are getting out of AI on our decisions, on our work, and on the choices of technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? Finally, I think the other interesting thing that I always find useful, I mean, people always talk about return on investments and risk adjusted return and what have you.
Yeah.
By the way, let me also share with you that not too many organizations have significant leeway in terms of having AI budgets.
Yeah.
And some of the
True.
bigger enterprises are betting. In the past few years of my own work, I've been dealing in billion-dollar budgets, and there's enough to kind of pen there. But if you look at the majority of AI journeys globally, organizations are not just struggling for bang for the buck, but also looking at buck for the bang,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means that the AI now opportunity is being evaluated in terms of investments, return, risk, etc., against say an HR process reengineering journey, or maybe a business process optimization or reengineering journey, or what have you, right? So, long story short, three pieces to this whole measures business. One is AI versus HI, human intelligence. The second is measures around decisions, work, and tools. And third is primarily bang for the buck versus buck for the bank.
Mm, yeah, awesome. So, technology is one part of the puzzle, and culture is another. So, what cultural shift are required to support responsible and strategic AI adoption, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I'll perhaps illustrate that with a simple example. A couple of years back, when I was working with Tesla, and we
Mm-hmm.
were working with Tesla, one of the typical ethical dilemmas that we are faced with and by the way, this was in public, so
Mm.
hopefully Elon Musk and gang will not sue me up for this. Kidding, great guy to work with. But on the lighter side, on a serious note, and this is a very classic ethical dilemma while designing car software, is if you've got a car speeding, and there's enough examples of that out there, and you've got an old person crossing the road from left to right, and you've got another kid, a toddler, crossing the road from
Mm.
right to left, and the car has to hit one of them, who is the car really going to hit,
Uh-huh.
right? And that's an ethical dilemma. It's a
Yeah.
choice that you'll have to make around AI, right? The point I'm trying to drive home is that one of the cornerstones when it comes to a culture for AI is not just to be good with AI, but also be responsible with AI,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the products that we end up developing, services, solutions, whatever, has to be ethically responsible AI, right? So one cultural piece is how do we kind of foster and inculcate that?
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do that is to keep having water cooler conversations, if you like,
Mm-hmm.
around what's good AI.
Mm-hmm.
Communities of practice is a great way in the enterprise to be able to foster some of that adoption and impact and so on and so forth. The
Mm-hmm.
other interesting piece that I've always found very fascinating, and maybe because I've got a bit of lineage, years
Yeah.
back, I was doing a lot of work in knowledge management. In fact, in the early years of knowledge management, I was fortunate to co-author a couple of books on the subject. And we used to talk about this whole concept called organization capital,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is everything the business knows. If you could put a value and a measure to it, what would that be, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, bringing that analogy forward to the question of trust around AI and culture around AI, there's also a culture of trying to foster AI conversations that lead and add to an organization capital. So, which means that every time, for example, we sign off on an AI project, if there's a way you could measure and see if it adds to the organization capital or takes away from it, then what we do is we end up creating a meritocratic culture
Mm-hmm.
around AI. So it's not just AI for good, it's also AI that adds to business impact and bottom line and fostering a culture around that.
Mm, yeah, interesting. Yeah, that has been like a thought-provoking pointers that you mentioned in this topic. So finally, as you look into 3 to 5 years ahead, what AI trends or technologies do you see as a potential disruptors in the market? Not necessarily just insurance industry,
Yeah.
but market as a whole.
Yeah, I think we are in the middle of a paradigm shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? The traditional model of technology was that we end up working, we end up using technology for our work,
Mm,
right? But with AI and AI, I think what we are seeing more and more is, and with all the jazz around agentic AI and LLM and LAM, all that kicking in, is it's not just about using technology. It's
mm-hmm.
actually about working with technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? Imagine in 3 to 5 years' time, if we were having this interview, it would be a shame, perhaps, if both of us were still speaking to each other on the
That
lighter
is true.
side, but perhaps our AI avatars will be talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
So one shift, Aline, is that we are moving into a co-creation economy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think AI and AI gives us beautiful possibilities to be able to do that and trust machines and their intelligence to be able to even guide our own thinking and the way forward. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one fundamental shift, which is around co-creation, machines and people learning to kind of work with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other piece, it kind of takes us back to the basics of software and technology. Years back, a professor actually mentioned this. I remember software and technology is a progressive elaboration of the human mind, right? It's a manifestation of what you think and being able to describe that and put it on print or whatever it is, externalize that, manifest that, that's software, right? With AI and AI, I think we are again at an inflection point in history where machines themselves will give us that opportunity to be able to manifest their thinking, and humans perhaps to be able to leverage some of that thinking and take it back into their own insights and how we live our lives and do our work, right? So I think, long story short, what I'm trying to say is that, while the world of technology is opening up to us to the possibilities of different languages and tools and methods and open source systems and what have you around AI and artificial intelligence and automation as well in a broader sense. But I think the challenge really is being able to co-create, being able to do that responsibly, and more importantly, continuing to push the envelope in terms of what we don't want to do with AI rather than what we just want to do with AI.
Yeah, very interesting and very insightful conversation, Riten. And thank you again for sharing such grounded and actionable insights on navigating AI adoption journey. So from aligning AI with business priorities to building trust in data, securing ecosystem, and preparing for the next wave of disruption, it is clear that isn't just about technology anymore. It's about vision, it's about structure, and it's about culture. So thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much again, Riten, for joining us today.
Pleasure, Ellie. Thank you for hosting me. Appreciate it.
Awesome.